Hey folks, this is Edmore. Um, we'll be talking today about editing existing animations in Elden Ring, and I will demonstrate my workflow, um, which does not involve 3D Studio Max. I will be using Blender for the full end-to-end workflow. Having said that, we will still need um, Havok content tools, as well as probably a lot of the tools that you are already aware of, which are staples of editing, Souls games. So without further ado, let's get started. So for the purposes of this demo, I won't be editing something super complex or making something super complex. I'll just be taking an existing animation, um, and we will be editing just some part of it. Maybe changing the distance or something like that. Maybe chopping up the animation, something like that, and we'll put it back into the game, and we will see how it works. The idea of this tutorial is not how to edit animations in Blender per se, but the purpose of this is to kind of demonstrate the full end-to-end workflow of, starting from Elden Ring all the way up to Blender, whatever you do for editing, and then of course, um, you know, um, exporting it back into Elden Ring and then seeing the results in the game. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we will be modifying the forward dodge when you are on light load. So, as you can see, we are, as you can see, we are on light load. And if you dodge, that's your current dodge. You know, Nothing special about it. Um, just for the purposes of the demo, what we would like to do is increase the dodge distance. And just to tangibly see the results in game, I'll increase the dodge distance to an unreasonable degree, not something that you would probably prefer to use in combat, obviously for the purposes of balance, but this is just a demonstration of how you can edit any existing animation, and I hope this kind of helps you get started doing your own things without necessarily having to deal with 3D Studio Max, which can be quite expensive, and so on. So yeah, this is the dodge, and for the purposes of this video, I will be listing out all the tools that need with their download links in the either in the video description or in on screen. So I'll probably put in links for those downloads as well. And yeah, so let's get started. So the first couple of tools that we will need to use, and this is just if you're kind of just getting started and aren't necessarily aware of all the tools in the ecosystem, will be to identify which animation is actually playing. Um, so to do that, we will need a very useful tool called Elden Ring Debug Tool. And if you go to the Player tab, you'll see that there's an animations section, and that will essentially kind of show you which animation is currently playing. I don't have two monitors, so for the purposes of this demonstration, I will simply make it windowed, so that I can put this thing behind me and I can show you what animation is actually going on. So while my character is running, you can see that the animation that's playing is 2100. If I do a forward roll dodge in light load, you see that it's running 2700, right? So every time I hit it, the number changes to 2700. So that's the animation we would like to edit. Cool. Okay. Now that we're kind of don't really need the debug tool, however, it's very useful and definitely worth having in your toolkit. So let's go back to your normal stuff. The next thing that you will want, you know, is Dark Souls Animation Studio. You know, I don't think it needs any introduction. It's one of the integral tools for you know, testing out animations, seeing changes, you know, editing the behavior, and so on and so forth. The time information, I mean. So you know, if we go to let me just check one thing. Yeah, if we go to 27100 and note that, you know, almost all of the cases when you're editing the default player behaviors, the files or the entries will essentially kind of start off with A000 underscore followed by the, you know, like a 6-digit number. In our case, it was 2700, so it'll be 02700. So if we go to you know, 02700, you'll see that this is the dodge that's essentially happening. So that's cool. Now, what we need to do is essentially export this out, this specific animation out, so that we can, you know, get it into Blender. So the first step is obviously go into Tools and click on Export Skeleton and Animations. Since everything is selected, we don't want to unpack everything, so you do a select none. Do that. You can click on skeleton. The skeleton is not super important, but you know, I just do it out of habit even at this point. And let's go to 27100. 27100 is this one. What we would like to do is, you know, the destination folder where it will be forwarded. Let's where it will be unpacked. We need to specify a folder. It will create one if it doesn't exist. So let's call it light forward dodge stretching. The last important bit that you need to make sure is that you click the second option for the file type, which is Havok 2010 pack file 32-bit. The other ones don't necessarily work with the workflow that I'm using. Cool. So having done all that, let's click on Start Export. And this should be done. It's very soon. All right, it's done. What we would like to do is, you know, we see that it has created this folder, light forward dodge stretching. And if you see, it has the two HKX files. So, you know, which are like the Havok files. So, you know, it has the skeleton, which we chose, and the actual animation itself. Now, at this point, you know, Blender can't consume this. In the future, there might be some more plugins which allow you to do that. But for the moment, what we will do is convert this file into a format which Blender can recognize. And for that, we will be using another tool. It's called the Havok Toolset. And I'll obviously put a link to download it and so on. The specific, it's kind of like a set of command line tools, or it's supposed to be. And one of the tool that we will be using, it's the HK2 GLTF, which is another format. but it is open source, I believe. It's an open format, not closed like um, Havok or Autodesk's FBX format. So what we'll do in this case is very simply take this file and kind of drag it onto this application, and you will see a window pop up momentarily, and you'll see a new file being created. Um, Same name as the original file, except that this one, if you look at its properties, you will see that it is of the type GLB, which is the format that we kind of want to work with. All right, so let's go into Blender. Let's just create it. Let's start from like scratch. All right, so we have our default cube and our camera and our lights. Let's get rid of all of those because we don't really care about them. Let's do an import, and we are importing GLTF. And if you go to the folder, light forward dodge stretching, you select this one. You will see, well, depending upon your settings, you'll see like a massive balls, which ultimately, which actually is the skelly, but it can be super distracting. One of the things the conversion tool also does is it kind of creates a stick figure to go along with your skeleton, if I remember reading the documentation correctly. And so that you're not looking at just the skeleton, so kind of like an aid to visualizing when you're editing your animations and stuff. But the first thing that we would like to do is just so that if you run it, you'll see that it is actually doing that animation, but of course it goes up to frame 250, so I'm just gonna make sure to see which frame it kind of like stops moving entirely, which seems like somewhere around that. So I think 40 might be the magic number, so we'll just put 40, so that we don't have to wait for it to cycle all the way up to 250 and then come back. So if you see, this is the dodge. Obviously, as you can see, this is like the skeleton is being visualized like this. So if you want to change that, you can go to on your right side, you'll see the object data properties of the skeleton. There you'll see viewport display. Right now it's displaying everything, each bone as an octahedron. That's what it's supposed to. So we can click off shapes and say that don't show them as shapes. And as soon as you click it off, you'll see like this sort of these default shapes that it shows when no specific shape is specified. What we want to do is kind of select wire, and once you do that, you actually can see the dummy which has been generated underneath. In fact, there are if you look at your object explorer, you'll see that there are two meshes. One of the meshes is kind of like the stick figure, and the other one is kind of like like just small spheres. But the advantage of this is if you now run this, you can see the stick figure kind of jumping, which kind of looks slightly better than just looking at a massive octahedrons rolling around. All right. That is done. Let's actually bring it up to 40. There are a couple of things that we will need to do to make sure that when we ultimately have finished editing our animations and do export it back, it is not in the character is not in the wrong orientation or the wrong direction. So for that, what we'll do is we'll set up some properties. So select the skeleton. Each of these lines essentially is essentially a bone. Go to object properties. Here you will want to select the mode as XYZ Euler, and make your rotation as 90. Obviously, it will, rotate it down on the plane so that it's below, but don't worry, it will come back very soon. And scale X, change it to -1, so that it's reflected. Its X coordinates are reflected. Um, and once you're done with that, um, actually, no, let me do Control Z. Once you're done with the rotation, the first thing that you really want to do, don't apply the scale yet. You want to press Control A, which actually applies the object data to the um, vertex, the object's transformation to the vertex data. This is something that Blender does. I don't necessarily understand why the transformation doesn't affect the object data in the first place, but we're not going to worry about that. I'm just going to select rotation. So you'll see that the -90 that we had applied here basically goes to 0. So this is essentially the object's position in the world at this point for all intents and purposes. Now what we really want to do is we want to now, we rotated by -90, right? But, just for the purposes of display, we put in 90 so that it's back to where it was to begin with. And of course, we also pick -1. This kind of mirrors it because the object, the character, when it's imported into Blender, is kind of flipped. Its left and right sides are interchanged. This is really only useful when it's important to set this scale transformation only if you're editing things like holding weapons in its left and right hands, and in game you're seeing the left hand which becomes your right hand in Blender. So just to kind of prevent cognitive dissonance, you might want to change it. So these rotations and this scale flip, this doesn't actually affect the data of the character when it's exported out. This is just so that it's on the XY plane and it kind of accurately reflects what it might look in the game itself. So basically nothing has changed effectively, but we had to do those transforms to make sure that the object is exported back correctly into the game once we are done editing the animation. All right, excellent. Now that we're here, we want to, starting at the origin, the character essentially kind of, roll dodges all the way up to 1, 2, 3, 4, just, 4 and maybe a little bit, into the 5th square. Just to prove, I'll probably just kind of make it 10 squares or something. I don't know. We can make it something. But let's worry about which bone we will probably be changing. So in this case, the bone that kind of controls the position of the character is essentially master. So if you expand it out, you'll see all the other bones and so on and so forth. But we are really at this point interested in the master, because that kind of, wherever the master goes, the rest of the body essentially goes. Once you're done with that, you kind of want to go into animation. And here, instead of in the the dope sheet, what we really kind of want to do, and obviously there are many different ways in which you can go about it. This is just what I kind of usually do. Not necessarily that this is the best way to do it, but this is a way to do it. So I go into animation, click on this icon, and I click on Graph Editor. If you look at Graph Editor, it is basically showing you, all the different attributes which are responsible for positioning of the master bone. So, the X, Y, Z locations, the rotations, which are essentially the 4 attributes, and of course the scale. We don't necessarily want to rotate anything. We don't want to scale anything. All we are really interested in is the Z location. I mean, the location of the master along the green axis. So what I'm going to do is, and I know it might look a little weird, but Pick Z location. Usually that's because Z is kind of like the forward location in you know, games and in a lot of other. It's kind of like a standard in games and stuff. Z is kind of like forward, and Y is up, and X is sideways. So you pick the Z location, and you can of course experiment with it. But you know, there are a lot of different lines, each of them corresponding to one of these attributes. So to kind of make it less cluttered, what you can essentially kind of do is right click here and say hide unselected curves, so it only selects the curve which is the Z location. And this essentially kind of tells you that, you know, this is how the master's position along the forward axis essentially deforms across multiple frames. So, you know, this is where you're at right now. And, you know, if you drag it along using the frame, you know, token position or whatever you want to call it, it is going to go to that. So you know, just for fun, you know, you can position it at the last frame so that you know what is essentially happening, and you know, you can select the last keyframe. And I know it's not the best thing. You know, you can press G, which means basically grab, and then you want to kind of move it up and down to kind of control the position along that axis. So if I press G and then Y, which means that it's only going to be constrained to move the keyframe up and down, you know, you can see that it essentially is moving down and so on, or up or whatever, right? But we don't want only the last frame to be that far, right? We want all the frames to kind of move proportionally, you know, so that it doesn't look like if I just clicked did something like this, it would be like it's going all the way here, you know, as it were, and then there's going to be a sudden jump. There it goes, and obviously that is not what we want. So I'm just going to control Z it. One thing that we probably want to do is we want to save our project, since we have already kind of just started work. We don't want to lose our work, obviously. So just gonna pick for the project name, I am going to pick this thing. It's gonna call blend, and that's done. All right, that's out of the way. All right, so what we really want to do is kind of, you know, affect the all the positions of all the other keyframes proportionally, so that they're kind of like smooth. So for that, what we really want to do is kind of turn on proportional editing, and that is this button here, small button, proportional editing of F curves. You click on that, and by default, the method of proportional editing will be smooth. There are other ways in which, you know, you can kind of decide how changing one point affects the positions of the other points, but we're just going to keep it nice and simple. So if you press G again and Y, you will see, if you you know, use your scroll wheel of your mouse, you will see a circle expanding, contracting, depending upon if you move your wheel up and down, and that kind of controls the area of influence of the keyframe. So the larger the circle, you know, the farther keyframes will be affected when I'm moving this keyframe up and down. So, you know, we kind of want to, you know, kind of affect the entire thing pretty much, except probably the starting position, I guess, because the starting position, we want to keep it at the center, basically at the origin. So I'm just gonna do it just a little bit before the center, and I am going to move it down. In fact, you know, while we're at it, why don't we move it some more down? It's probably going to be atrocious when we actually see it in game, but you know, this is just for demonstration purposes, and you can see that this is as far as it has gone. So, you know, if we put here, it's gonna move all the way here proportionally. The animation might potentially finish before it has reached its end position, but we can probably modify that using by changing the speed of the animation, but not in here at this point. This is just for the position of the master. All right. So once that is done, let's just save this as it is. This essentially is the edit to our animation, effectively, to be honest. All we really now need to do is kind of bring it, take it out of Blender, and then kind of just test that it's working. So, so to do that, we will do an export, and this time we will export to FBX. And FBX, couple of things that we will probably want to export. I'll just select visible objects, so it only you know, if you kind of look at it, the only objects that will be exported would be the armature and the mesh zero. We can just export everything that's there in this list. I usually click on armature and turn off the add leaf bones. But the most important setting that you want to change, which absolutely is gonna, you know, make your character be in a weird orientation if you don't do it correctly, is the forward and the up axis. In this case, what you really want to do is just want to pick up change your forward to Y forward, and Z is basically up, which is fine, which is your normal Cartesian coordinate system convention. The reason being, since we have already done our rotations inside the character, you know, while we are setting up all those transforms and stuff, you know, we you know, choosing the standard convention is gonna make it end up in the correct position when we export it back into the game. So yeah, with that done, let's export it. And if you can see here, it will have exported this folder. I mean this file. It will be the FBX file. Right, now, this FBX file needs to ultimately be imported into the game, and effectively that means transforming this into an HKX file, which is the format that we exported out of the game to begin with. But we can't do that just yet. We'll have to kind of do that in 2 stages. So the first stage is to convert this FBX file into an HKT file. And for that, we will be using another tool. It's called an FBX importer. There are a lot of tools called FBX importers, but the one that I'm talking about is the one which actually is used when modding Skyrim, to be fair. And I'll obviously, as I said, I will put in the links to those things. What I want to do is I want to run this command line. And if you see, what I really want to do is I want to select the output as being skeleton light forward dodge stretching, and the output I want it to be of type HKT, right? And the file that we want the thing to operate on is going to be skeleton light forward dodge stretching. Pick light forward dot stretching blend, no, blend one, no, FBX. That's the one, right? So, you know, do that and we run it. And as you can see, it would have created 2 files. One is oh, where did it go? Light forward dodge stretching, yeah. Ideally should have created 2 files. I'm just trying to see where it did create it. Light forward dodge stretching. The output was supposed to be work skeleton light forward dodge. Oh, apologies. It would have created it outside here. I forgot to go into the folder when selecting it. So, you know, I'll just get rid of these just to show you the correct way of doing it, and I'm gonna pick light forward dodge stretching slash. Okay, and that should give us, no, it should have. Why? Oh, my bad, my bad, my bad. I put a equal to instead of a dash, so it would have, I don't know what it would have done. Maybe it created the folder or didn't create the folder. It doesn't matter. Anyways, I think at this point it should have created the files, and that's correct. It has created two HKT files, light forward dot stretching HKT and the armature motion. So this second one, the one with the longer name, is the one that we actually want to use. So the next thing that we really kind of want to do is run, Havok Content Tools, a standalone filter manager. And when you have the filter manager, you kind of want to go to this folder and pick up this one. That's the only file we want, so we can just press escape. We don't care about the asset path. Just press escape and OK, and it should load it up. Okay. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to kind of load a configuration set, and I'll link what the configuration set kind of looks like going forward, but for the moment I'm just gonna copy it from an existing configuration set that I already had. There are a couple of things that we will need to change in this configuration set because it's from exporting / importing another animation. The file names will be different, but most importantly, the ones that you need to necessarily worry about are the align scene to node. You want to pick the reference node. You want to pick anything which looks like armature, which is below the root node. So you want to pick armature, not mesh 0 or something. That's the one which essentially has the bones and so on. So yeah, you would go ahead and pick that. I'm just gonna just scan through the different steps really quickly. Once you have the configuration, you can look at the details of what the settings are in each of these things by yourself. The other two things that you do need to change is when it actually writes out the HKX file. So essentially what it really does is it's running through each of these steps. So it kind of transforms the scene, it aligns the scene to a root node, it creates the skeleton, creates the animation. So essentially it's kind of converting the HKT to HKX, and it needs to do each of these things in order to output the correct information. The ones that we really do need to change are the platform, the two write to platform steps. The first one I just kind of output to the folder that we have been working on anyways, just so that we have access to it. So I'm just going to call it light forward dodge stretching final. Do that. And the last one is the one that will ultimately get repacked into the game, and this is the file which really does matter. Now, if you remember from here, we had exported 27100, and one of the things that we could potentially do is just export back the same file name, and for reasons that I'll explain later, I do not usually like replacing the base game file, the animation files directly as they are. Rather, I like to export them back into the game under a different name, and then just override the default behavior in DS Animation Studio so that you can either enable the override or go back to the base game animation, without having to worry about repacking and unpacking and all of those things again. So what I'll do, and I usually kind of end up picking like super random ID. You can pick one, uh, if you're interested in. I have a whole lot more entries in my C00 Anybind thing, but I'm gonna pick A997080. That one does not have any animations at this point, so I'm just gonna copy that and um, this is, I'll talk about this folder in a second. I realize that I haven't talked about this, but we are going to output the file into this folder. So with that name, with that entry. So that's the first thing that we want to do. The second thing that we want to do is, so let's talk a little bit about that folder. That is essentially the game folder, which has essentially kind of been, part of the game folder, the CHR folder that you have in your game. So if you have Mod Engine 2 set up, this would essentially kind of be your mod engine right here. And in your CHR, you would have the DCX files that you are essentially overwriting with the entries for your custom animations and such. And I have unpacked, C A1X Anybind DCX here. This tab shows you the details of this folder. So, that's once we are kind of done with outputting the new file into this folder, we are going to pack up this folder back into the DCX, and it's going to replace the existing DCX, and essentially we just either restart the game or ask the game to kind of do a character reload. So yeah, we're not quite there yet. We still have to kind of see how our animation kind of looks like before importing it back into the game altogether. So the other thing that we really need to do is we need to add an entry to this new file with the new ID that we are outputting. But let's just get to the good part and hopefully see that the animation is working. So once we have kind of done it, just to make sure that this is the ID, we're not overriding any existing files, and this is the file that we are outputting here. Once all that is done, we can click run all configurations. It's going to output a whole bunch of stuff in your logs, and it's going to open the preview thing, which kind of shows you the path, right, the dotted line, and you see that the path is quite long. So I think we're reasonably confident that our edit kind of made it back into the export and into this tool. So you can kind of see the skeleton, I guess, if you want to do that. So yeah, it looks like that. That's the kind of animation. And incidentally, just running this entire thing would have written it to the platform as well. So if you go to your A1X folder here, at the bottom, you will see that a new file has been created, A9970000780, which was the one that we wanted in the first place. Now, just repacking this is not going to import it back into the game. We need to update a manifest file. And that manifest file basically is, if you go into the top level of the folder, you'll see this called Yabber BND4, and that's the one that we kind of want to modify. So I already have this open. It's essentially XML. I just want to replicate one of the existing entries, and what I really want to do is I kind of want to take this name, and I kind of want to put it there. I also want to change the ID. The ID just involves taking the same name, getting rid of the underscore, and replacing A with 1. That's basically about it. And we go ahead and save it. All right, it's saved. All right, so now that that is done, we are ready to repack everything that's in here, including our new file, animation file, back into the DCX file. So for this, I'll just take this folder, take it to Yabber, and drop it in here. And as you can see from the timestamp, the date modified, it was just modified, which means that it has been packed. Excellent. Now, to there are a couple of ways in which we can test it. One is we can just restart the game. At least for me, I feel an easier way to do that is just reload. Um, just reload this, DS Animation Studio, and then ask it to kind of reload the game. Much better. So I kind of just go ahead and load the animebind.dcx. Take the usual settings, and I might do a section on how to set that, but to set up DS animation so that you can see what sort of animations are in the game. But I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other tutorials which go into much more detail than that. So we'll see about that. Okay, so we have reloaded everything. It's still loading the assets. We'll do is we'll go to 997 and we will go to the end, which was that 780 entry, which should ideally have the one that we are interested in. So see, it's in the starting pose. If I run it, you can see. If I zoom out, you can see that it is going really, really far, right? And now, well, this is an entry, right? But this is not linked to our actual dodge animation. So I'm going to press Control J to copy this entry. I mean, the name of this entry. I'm going to go to the dodge animation, which was 27100. If you remember, that's what we saw in the debug tool when we were, starting out. So, this is the default, dodge. Now, this is where I want to talk about why I didn't like overwriting the files as they were, because there's a way in which, so if I press F3, or alternatively you can, second, kind of frozen. Let me pause the animation actually. You can either press like edit current animation properties, or you can press F3. If you look here, you can say override HKX, and you can put in an HKX entry, which would, in our case, can be the 997, the 780 entry, which is our new animation. So, which means that if something goes wrong, or if I want to go back and change something, the base animation is still there. I can use it to compare things and so on and so forth. So if I apply it, go to another animation ID and then just a space. So remember, this is the animation of the actual dodge, and now this has been replaced by this really long, far-reaching dodge at this point, right? And if I really wanted to, for some reason, wanted to go back to the original animation, I could just unclick this override HKX and then apply changes, and just kind of go back to this entry again and a second, and it's back to its original. So that's a easier way of overriding things without necessarily overriding the files themselves. Let's go ahead and apply these changes, but at this point it has not been reloaded back into the game. We need to save this overriding behavior. So we press Control S, and it's also going to ask the game to reload our character. And this is our character. Now if I roll dodge, see how far it goes. Right, so just for comparison and just to demonstrate how easy it is to revert back to the original behavior, I'm just going to click off the override HKX, and I'm going to say apply and save changes. And then once that is done, I'll press Control S again. It's going to reload it back into the game, and you'll see that this is just the original forward dodge with light roll behavior, right? And of course, if I want to revert, obviously, Save it. Requesting reload. It's going to come back. And there you go. It's just a demo. I'm probably gonna get killed anyways. Not that I really care. Alright, that's enough of that. Enough shenanigans. But yeah, I think you know, you can essentially kind of apply the same concept to you know, adding in completely new animations altogether, animations which you would have probably gotten like HKX files from, and so on and so forth. You just simply need to kind of go through the workflow and import them into Blender. And as you can see, we did the entire thing without you know, touching 3D Studio Max. Obviously, with the Havok Content Tools integration that we have for 3D Studio Max, you know, that kind of lets it import HKX files, you know, much more easily. We had to go through a couple more steps of running a couple of command line tools and so on and so forth, but I think that's a fair price to pay for having to not you know, use like proprietary you know, modeling software and stuff, and you know, it's quite flexible. Cool. You know, if you have any questions or doubts or something like that, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them. Also, the Dark Souls modding Discord, you know, that is also available. I'm also there. My ID is I'll put it in the description, and you can ping me. I'm kind of pretty new to Souls modding myself, but there's a lot of great people who would be only too willing to kind of share their expertise with you. Cool. Having said that, that brings us to the end of the video. Hope you found something useful, and if you find a better way of doing the same thing without necessarily having to resort to proprietary software, feel free to message me or you know, put that in the comments. And so with that, we come to the end.